Those of you that have been patrons of mine are familiar with something we do called Moments with Mark. We're going to expand that format today and turn a Moments with Mark into a full-blown question and answer session that many of you have been nice enough to provide. So let's get on down that rabbit hole. Cue sonorous entrance music. Lots of great questions got asked to me. And the one that got asked the most often is who the heck are you and where did you come from? My wife asks me that every morning. In fact, I got flipped off 3 times today on my commute to work by the same woman, and that's the last time I'm taking my wife to work. Honest to God. My father was a fighter pilot back in the 1950s, a very mechanical guy, great shooter. I watched my dad shoot league skeet the whole time I was growing up. I wanted to be a gunsmith. I wanted to be a gunner's mate. That's what I wanted to do. I also had this small fetish for electrical things. More on that later. So flash forward 1982, I go in the Navy because I wanted to go in the military. All my uncles were World War II guys. My dad was Korea, that kind of stuff. That's Ronald Reagan's 600 ship Navy time. If any of you guys know what the ASVAB is, I aced it. I got a 99 on it, and they were not going to allow me to be a gunner's mate. Great rate, but they made me a nuclear electrician, and I spent 10 years in submarines. At the end of the day, I'm a gearhead, and getting to be the 4th man ever assigned to the crew of what was going to become SSN 722 USS Key West is a gearhead's dream to watch them fabricate a Los Angeles class submarine from the bottom to the top. And I'm going to tell you what, I got to crawl in the stern tube and out one of the torpedo tubes. And when you've gotten to look at an atomic submarine asshole appetite, I'm going to tell you, it's an amazing thing. Got out of the military, and before all the industry left this country, I wound up making my living as an industrial electrician. I worked at steel mills, I worked for elevator companies, I worked for aluminum companies. I spent 6 months in Kazakhstan automating a uranium mill, and I've got to tell you this, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was teaching mechatronics in high school. It was also the most fulfilling. The average 15, 16-year-old guy can't count to 21 without his fly down. Just saying. I'm old enough now, and let's just say that when the world got flipped upside down for 8 years there and everything ground to a screaming halt in this country, I had to switch over to my other trade, which was gunsmithing. I built my first gun when I was 12. My father bought me a little CVA flintlock pistol kit. For those of you that are wondering, I have tracked down all 5 of the first guns I've ever made, cut them up in a chop box, and it was nothing a good hot firewood and fix. So they don't exist anymore, so don't even bother looking for them. Well, here I am. So now I'm your gunsmith, and I'm glad to be of assistance. What separates a gunsmith from everyone else? What separates a gunsmith from a machinist? What separates a gunsmith from a mechanic, from an armorer? There are 3 things you have to be able to do to really actually be a gunsmith, and the ability to do these 3 things then infers that you know a lot of stuff. You have to be able to make a chisel ridiculously sharp. You have to be able to make flat springs, and you have to know how to use a file. Those 3 things. You need to be relatively mechanically inclined. You need to have the ability to think kind of outside of the box and realize that you now have the responsibility because you are doing something that is rather high pressure. It's kind of like an auto mechanic that works on brakes. So you have to understand that. You cannot be rectally cranially challenged. You cannot walk around condition white all the time. You got to be paying attention. You got to be able to think. But basically, I get asked this question: how do I become a gunsmith? Grab a tool and start screwing up. Sooner or later, your screw ups start looking like work. Eventually, people will pay you to screw up. That brings me to another point about what do I look for in an apprentice? Am I looking for a guy that's a carbon copy of me? No. I'm looking for somebody that's going to be better than me. You're not irreplaceable. If you think you're replaceable, pull your finger out of a bowl of water and watch how big a hole it leaves. I'm looking for people that will question me. My lead apprentice, Casey, I'm going to tell you what, that boy calls BS on me daily, and he needs to, and I've gotten a lot better because of it. I'm looking, if I'm talking to you and you're talking about your last 3 AR-15 builds, you're not my guy. That's, what makes a gunsmith is the ability. Guys can screw things together all the time. Can you make the screws? So what am I looking for in an apprentice? Someone that does not have the fear of failure and is not afraid to pick up the tool and start messing up. I need a guy with a brain. I need a guy that can get the business aspect of what's going on here. And I need a guy that'll show up. 90% of winning is showing up. I have 8 apprentices. I see 3 of them on a regular basis. The other 5 bounce in and bounce out of here. This is a hobby for them. My head apprentice is a Georgia farm boy, wanted to be a gunsmith since he was 6. He's an Eagle Scout. He went in the Marine Corps. What am I going to do with that? Not like non-fat yogurt. It's not like non-fat yogurt. Do I look like the guy? I weigh 1/8 of a ton. Do I look like the kind of guy that eats like non-fat yogurt? But I'm going to tell you what, I get asked this a lot. Why the kerosene? Why not gasoline? We use kerosene in order to harden off the bluing that we do. You don't need to use it. I do it because I'm in a production environment. Gasoline we do not use because gasoline's vapor will collect on the floor and produce an explosive vapor. Gasoline is mildly carcinogenic, and if you live within 3,000 miles of the state of California, they'll tell you that. I don't use gasoline in this shop just because its vapors will crawl everywhere and they will get ignited. I just can't have that. We smoke cigars in here. We have open flame. We have open ignition sources. Kerosene is used as jet turbine fuel because it is very hard to provoke it. But I'm going to tell you what, I had a very, very good friend of mine in the Navy who could just tell you whether or not it was motor oil or kerosene or not. And I have to tell you, I would think that this is motor oil. The only reason why I smoke a cigar in a shop when you're working, because it covers up the taste of the motor oil. Screwing up is inevitable. I got asked, have you ever made a mistake that was so bad you had to buy a gun? Yeah, I've made a couple of them, and I'm not going to admit that to you. I made some mistakes in the Navy. I made some mistakes when I worked in that steel mill, that 7-digit mistake. I made a programming error. We didn't really realize it until 2 years after I had programmed this thing that would slow the number 1 reversa mill down automatically, that we started to run a product that every now and then, something that had worked for 2 years stopped working. The mill wouldn't slow down. It would zip the strip right through on first pass. We finally figured it out, and it was one of the tougher troubleshooting things I ever did, that this product made so much noise when it was unwinding that the ultrasonic distance detector that was telling me how thick the coil was divided by how thick the x-ray gauge was telling you was how many wraps were left on it, was being flooded. It blew up. It pulled a piece of 1/4-inch plate through the mill, and I'm going to tell you what, a piece of 1/4-inch plate, 75 inches wide, going 45 miles an hour, going at the end, tore a $750,000 shape meter roll off the exit end of the mill, tore the exit carryover table off, broke the exit gearbox off of its mounts. I knew it was going to happen. I discovered it, whatever. You make mistakes. People have made bigger mistakes than that. No one got hurt. I knew it was coming. I warned everybody. It happened. Mistakes. These are my 3 original attempts. That was the first one. That was the second one. And this is the third attempt. I had almost 3 days tied up in making that Madsen cartridge cutoff. The one that's in the gun looks good because I had to redo the engineering. But I'm going to tell you what, mistakes are inevitable and they do happen. My apprentices are allowed to make mistakes. You're going to screw up a customer gun. What do you do about it? And that's what separates professionals from amateurs. Amateurs will practice until they get it right. Professionals will practice until they don't get it wrong. Or to quote my grandfather, amateurs will expend time to save resources. Professionals will expend resources to save time. Time is the enemy of the privileged few. Cost is the enemy of the masses. You don't buy what I do, you buy my expertise and you buy my time, and that's why I'm relatively expensive. 5. Difficult projects. Most favorite, least favorite, most common, rarest. All right. The most common thing I wind up doing, I don't know if you folks have actually been on my Instagram, I'm a rolling Acroglass commercial. I don't do it because I'm shilling for Brownells. I use Acroglass a lot. That's my most common repair. The wood will give away a gun way before the metal will give it away. Shotgun stored muzzle up and all the oil runs down into the head of the stock and punks all that wood out. Guns that have been dropped downstairs. We had a customer named Mr. Budweiser that dropped a really, really large gun down a set of steps. It was nasty. Snapped it in half. So that's pretty much the most common repair I do. A lot of duffel cuts. Why does a duffel cut cost me $300 to do? Because there's more to it than just that. But there's a lot that goes into, that's my most common repair. And I've got to keep reading off the list here. The rarest repair I ever did, I did a flintlock handgun that was made, I don't know, in the 1500s, blind holes. It was found by one of the local sheriffs in a crack raid. That was a rare gun. I needed a Repoussé new nose cap for it. I put a new sear in it. I undid probably 3 or 4 previous repairs because the stock was kind of broken. It was a really, really nice dueling pistol about that big. That one was rare. I got to make a new bolt and trigger return spring for a London gun company Colt. That was pretty damn rare. You talk about unobtainium, working on the Patterson device. That was pretty damn rare. Working on a gun that Sam Colt might have touched is pretty humbling. Before W.W. Greener, the Louder, finished his apprenticeship with his father, W. Greener, he swore to God he would never make another percussion gun, that breech loading weapons were the way forward. He only made 48 percussion shotguns, and I've recheckered 3 of them. That's pretty rare. Most favorite repair? Old flintlocks. I love real men shoot flint. Come on, we all know that smokeless powder is a passing fad.
Woo, buddy.
Now we get to my least favorite repairs, and I do a lot of them, but I'm going to have to tell you this. If you take an English percussion double barrel shotgun, you have a web of wood. There's the standing breech. There's the web of wood and the barrel sit down in it. It's weak right here, right? So now if you inlet that for a set of locks on either side of it, the gun gets even weaker through the wrist. But if the entire gun is bolted together solid, it actually works pretty well till the wood starts to dry out, rot, become oil soaked, and then the gun gets loose and it starts to beat itself up. Now I'm getting to a point here. If you then inlet a receiver into that with side locks, you now have 4 fingers of wood supporting all of that recoil load. And that brings me to my least favorite guns that I like to work on, and that is every Crescent, every L.C. Smith, and I'm sorry, every Parker ever made. All right? L.C. Smiths, all of them have rotted solder. I don't care. If I catch an L.C. Smith with a set of barrels that ring, I'm astonished. Parkers are the classic example of a blivet. It's 9 pounds of crap in a 2-pound box. Parker ejector guns. Are you kidding me? Parkers and LC Smiths are a pain in the neck to be worked on. And I'm sorry, they were farm implements. Sorry, Parker collectors, all right? They're heavy, they don't balance right. They've got a lot of parts count in them. They're a pain in the neck, all right? That's why I unfortunately have to charge a tax for those guns, because they are an absolute flaming pain in the neck to get it all together. There is wood in those guns that set critical tolerances on how the safeties work, how the sears interact, how everything happens. They're just my least favorite to work on, followed by any 22 caliber gun. 22s are a smoking, smoldering hole in the ground for labor. Why? Because I'll have $400 to $500 worth of labor tied up in a $100 gun, and I'll have the same amount of labor tied up in making that 22 work as I will glass bedding and pillar sleeving a Model 70. It's competing on my bench. Well, it's a $50 gun. How come it's it's $500? Because you're buying my time, and that's just an unfortunate part of it. If you've got an old 22, I got news for you. Unless it's all there and it's not worn out and we're going to reliner the barrel, that's a separate job. That's a separate topic. Go buy a 1022 and never look back. Those guns were disposable when they were made. They just were. Those are my least favorites to work on. I'll do them, of course, because what's really for sale? My skills or your money? Sex wax? I get asked that. Mr. Zog's Sex Wax. Those of you that are a little bit older than I, that's a surfboard wax, a little bit of an abrasive in it that I use for lubricating screws with when I run them in and out of a stock. The slight amount of abrasive actually cuts the threads for like a wood screw, and then you run it in and out of the hole several times to heat the screw up, and then wax lubricates the hole, and it just makes assembling screws, mounting recoil pads, etc., a lot easier. All the stuff that's up on my bench is up there for a damn good reason. It's the stuff I use. The 90th percentile stuff's up on the bench, all right? The rest of it's in toolboxes. I try to reach for my toolbox as little as I can. The most difficult projects I've ever had to do, wow, and a lot of those are off of, outside of the shop and inside of the shop. We'll start with the ones inside the shop first. I would say, by and large, the MP18 recovery was probably the most complex, the longest. It took us 9 months to get 4 minutes and 37 seconds worth of video. I must have done that MP18 25, 30, 40, 50 times in my head. Always do jobs in your head first. I've got a couple of notes written here that I'm looking at. The Kammerlader was pretty difficult. The Kammerlader, that was an extremely involved project. The Kammerlader is now done. It has been fully reset. That's a pretty good looking gun. This Manton that's sitting up here in a checkering cradle behind me, this Manton was this is a complex project. There's a lot to that. You really do not understand what 300 years of aristocratic patronage will do for a gun industry. That Manton is just amazing. Everything I looked, they didn't make a single cut. They didn't make a single file swipe on that gun without meaning it. And I'm trying very, very hard to pay Joseph Manton and the Hayward family that owned it. One of the men that signed the Declaration of Independence, his family. He didn't own it, but there's some provenance there. In terms of figuring out what to do and figuring out how it had to work, I would have to say that Barracks Locks Bosun Philipstad rates up there, the Swede. We did 3 Anvil episodes on that. I'm not bagging on the guy that owns it, but that is the closest I've ever come to tomahawking a gun into the weeds. I got to tell you what. Gah! And that leads me to another part of this, which is triage. You wind up, those of you that have sent me projects, I say, will advise after triage, meaning I've got a minimum shop fee. You buy an hour of my time to go down inside a gun and find out. If I don't get an opportunity to go down inside a gun, my minimum estimate is $1,000. It's not going to cost you that, but that's my estimate. $47? You said it was going to cost $45. I can't have that anymore. I can't wind up getting down inside of a gun and finding out that that little stock crack that I was supposed to fix wasn't all the way through the wrist break. Are you kidding me? That's so how do you troubleshoot? What are the toughest ones I've ever done? The toughest gun one I ever did, it took me about 6 months to figure this out. I was brought a gun that wouldn't pick up the left barrel, or it was under barrel selector occasionally. Well, the gun was brought to me in the middle of the winter and I couldn't get it to manifest it. But there are some customers that don't make stuff up. They just don't make stuff up. And I'm like, this gun was screwing up. Why? Well, by the time I pulled it back out again, I took it out sporting claying on a 95 degree, you're not breathing air, it's low pressure steam, hot South Carolina day, and about 60 rounds into this round of sporting clays, it hung up. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Got it back to the shop, pulled out a hot air gun, heated up the action, and all of the parts had thermally grown just enough to take the selector out of service that would rattle when the gun was cold. 3 swipes with a needle file, out the door. It took me 6, 7, 8 months to get on that one. That was a tough one. I had a couple of them in the Navy that I'm not even sure I can even talk about right now that were tough nuts to crack. But how do you go about that? Every problem is made up of a whole bunch of problems. So when I get into something, I start solving the problems. An problem is dirt, rust. I'll call that internal patina if you want me to call that a word. You get rid of all of the problems. This is a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. And just like in life, most the problems are made up of a bunch of problems. I can't even begin to tell you how I learned how to troubleshoot, but I'm going to tell you what, it was a fabulous amount of screwing up, and we're right back to that. A long time ago, I dove down inside the historical arms making practices, and I started looking at how things were done a while back, and I'm not claiming to be good, I'm not claiming to be bad. What I'm telling you is that I figured out how they did things in the 1800s, and I'm living inside the head of an 1800s gunsmith. This is a Manton that was actually in the Hugo flood in Charleston, and this Manton was nasty. I'm telling you, nasty. It was gray, the locks were orange. We've put the wood back together again. We're going to display this particular unit at the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition. And the question was this: do you put a maker's mark on what you do? I'm getting to the point, it's getting scary. I'm not trying to fake things, but I'm getting to the point where you have to have a way to distinguish between what I did and what a guy that did what I did in the 1800s did in the 1800s. It's getting to the point where the calendar doesn't matter. Yes, I discreetly mark these things with the repair done by M. Novak, 2019, Charleston, South Carolina, 2019. I do that. There are subtle differences here. That looks like English flat top checkering. I'm going to tell you there are subtle things that distinguish it. And the guy that knows will look at it and know, because I'm not trying to pay. If this was an original Manton and the checkering was in that shape, this pig is worth a ton. I got to tell you. Those of you guys that have been on my Instagram page have seen where this particular, the rear of this stock had blown. You can't even see that either. So there's there. All right, here you go. Here's an interesting piece of kit. We'll talk about this here for a second. That is a blank firing attachment to a show. There are not very many original blank firing attachments to shows known to exist. I'm going to draw this blank firing attachment. I'm going to make the drawings available to everyone. My watermark on that is there are going to be a couple of dimensions that I put on those drawings that are not critical to the function of the part, but are not accurate. And if you replicate that thing and try to pass it off as an authentic piece of kit without, if you're using my drawing to do it, You're not going to get away with it if somebody asks me, hey, these were your drawings, is this part authentic? I'll say, measure this, measure that, measure the other thing, and tell me if it's 8 or 10 thousandths off, and I'll tell you whether or not it's real or not. By the way, we've done a lot of show work. This thing plugs into that Venturi looking part up at the muzzle, and a wooden bullet comes down the barrel, pops into this hole right here, and is shredded as it pops out. And this big hairy screw looking gizmo holds it in and is hanging out the muzzle to go, hey, you have what amounts to a top grade bore obstruction plugged in the front of this gun. Books, actual paper books, like photographs that are left over from World War I, are very low density, incredibly high cost storage media. Okay? But books work because the sun came up. This book is still operational, even though I dropped it on a table. And guess what? This book is still going to be operational 100 years from now. In my particular trade, this trade is 600 and something years old already. You have to have a library. You have to read. If you read for a half an hour a day, I don't know where I found this statistic, but I think I saw something that Abraham Lincoln said on the internet that if you read a book, a half an hour a day, every day for a year, you'll be in the top 3% of the knowledge pool of your trade or specialty. In my particular case, these 4 books right here, Professional Gunsmithing by Mr. Howe, Dunlop's book on gunsmithing, Clyde Baker's book on gunsmithing, and then a fairly old book that was from Mr. Vickery. I have found that those are the 4 tomes that actually have most of the information in them. The books in my, just right up here in the shop, this is maybe 20% of my library. I have an entire library at home. I have an entire library in storage, and I've given away a lot of other ones to a lot of people. You're not collecting books, you're collecting information. I have collectible books in this place that I don't leave open on the bench and don't get my greasy fingerprints on, but a lot of them I do. Read, and read some more, and read some more. 100 years from now, all of this digital stuff, I don't think you'll even be able to retrieve it. That's an issue. So, books. My wife, Mary Ann from Gilligan's Island, Zoe Deschanel, Amy Farrah Fowler. Just saying, in the speed industry back in the 60s, you can go fast, you can go reliably, or you can go for not a lot of money. Good, fast, cheap. Pick the 2 you want. You cannot have all 3. Good and fast is expensive. Good and cheap takes a long time. I don't do fast and cheap. And this is in response to a question about why are you expensive and why are a lot of gunsmiths kind of grumpus wampuses? Why are they difficult to deal with? And I'll tell you why. Because after a little while, you realize that your time is money, and you can start talking to people, and you know almost immediately where this is going. I hate to tell you that. So a lot of those guys aren't grumpy until you've got them in the 37th email exchange where you're back and forth, hemming and hawing. I try to be really, really polite about it. I try to not cut people off arbitrarily. I try to not do a couple of things. But at the end of the day, you know, I've done $2,000 projects for $400. You're not going to see it for 2 years because I'm doing it in between. I'm tucking it in the holes where it doesn't belong. Why are good gunsmiths expensive? Because there's a lot of thought to this. It's more art than it is science. It's not robotics, because that's what armorers do. Armorers just change parts. Gunsmiths are looking at tolerance stack and they're pulling things in and out. So the whole point is that if you need to be in a hurry with anything in life, that applies to auto mechanics, that applies to a lot of things. Good and fast is expensive, and good and cheap just takes a long time. If you find a guy that advertises the best quality for the lowest prices, he's heading for the bottom and he's going to be out of business. So that leads me to another part of this that I didn't say before, but you're operating a business and you better damn well understand how businesses operate. You better get cash flow. You better get time management. You better get a lot of things, which puts us into the real heart of this question. How come you don't film an anvil of this quality every week or every 3 days? Because it takes us 3 shop days a month to put out one anvil. Now, we film 2 of them at a time, but that's a fabulous time commitment. I could let the quality of this go down the drain, and I won't do that. So here's the whole point. A lot of you guys want fast and cheap out of these videos, but you want fast and good, and very few of you will pay for it. And those of you that pay for it, I thank you very much. And you'll find that I answer 100% of your comments. Thank you. Have you tried this kind of material for printing the Dardic round? Have you ever thought about doing your machining setup this way? Have you ever thought about this might be the answer to your problem? Guys, I love you guys and I want to hear it. And there are a lot of great suggestions that come through. And I'm going to tell you what, the only stupid questions on the planet are the ones you didn't ask. And I like stupid questions because they're easier to answer. But here's the deal. We're not showing you how to do anything here. I'm showing you what I'm doing, and I'm only showing you 5% of it. All right? So there's this assumption out there that because you saw something, it had to be on a video because we got to get on with it. And we're trying to, and it is what it is. You only get to see 5% of what I'm doing, what I know how to do. I'm not showing you everything. I'm in business. I can't show you everything. There are some things we're going to pick apart and do detailed stuff on. But a lot of the stuff that we go blasting through, how come you're not, when are you ever going to stop doing the, when are you going to stop doing the fast motion? Are you ever going to stop doing the music? I don't want to stop doing the music. I like using classical music from the country of origin. I don't mind playing the piano. Yes, I do play the piano. No, I do not own a player piano. I really don't. So I'm only really showing you 5% of what we've got and what goes on in the shop. We speed it up because we're trying to condense it down a little bit. Remember, the mind can absorb only what the ass can endure. We're really, 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 really trying to do that for you. But I can't give away the whole farm, and I don't like being kibitzed by people that don't understand what it is I'm trying to do here. I've been asked the question, what kind of cigars am I smoking? I have a very good friend of mine that owns Town Center Tobacco and Wine here in Charleston, who is very connected into the Nicaraguan tobacco trade and has a lot of friends down there. And when you have someone that's buried that deep into the system, you don't smoke garbage, and I don't smoke garbage. So we're, pencil. All right, I'm gonna get going here. Bruno, find me a pencil. We'll just use this for right now. So the very first one that I was smoking was a Reina Cubana. Reina Cubana is an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper. And it has also a Maduro wrapper. It depends upon which one you want. So you can get this Reina in a dark and a light. I prefer the lighter wrappers just because it makes for a nicer smoke and it doesn't spin my head so bad, but I really like that. Everything in here has Nicaraguan fillers and binders. It's actually very good, medium-bodied. It's kind of spicy. It's actually a pretty decent cigar. This is my go-to in the shop, this Reina. This was Sigmund Freud's cigar, and he picked the trademark back up and ran with it here. The next one is a Palmetto State, and the Palmetto States are actually also available from John. Another Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper, but it's got a Habano seed and a Jalapa binder. And Jalapa is a valley in Nicaragua that runs down in Ecuador. There's another valley down in the Trojes Valley. I don't know that much about it, but I do know that the stuff that comes up from there is really well. Once again, a lighter wrapper, I prefer that. All right, there's two My Fathers here that came up out of Miami that are really, really good. And once again, these were recommended to me. They had come up and actually done a very nice sales pitch to us, and I went ahead and bought, oh, hang on, oh yeah, that's better. This is a Connecticut from My Father in Miami. It's an Ecuadorian Connecticut tobacco wrapper, And the binder in it is a Coro 99, which is really nice. It has a great flavor to it. And it's also got, the filler is also from Nicaragua. I like this. It's a lighter smoke. I don't like getting my head spun. This particular one right here is one of their originals. It's an Oscuro wrapper, and it's really, really good. The filler and binder are all Nicaraguan. Just really good, hand-rolled stuff. They roll them down in Miami. Great stuff. The last one here, this is the Moulin Labe. If you want them, come and take them. And I'm going to tell you what, that's probably the best cigar I've ever laid hands on. John spent about 3 years working with the folks down in Honduras to be able to come up with a way to make this. It's got a Honduran wrapper from the Troje Valley, like I said before. I hope I pronounced that right. And the fillers are from Nicaragua and Honduras, and really, really good, well-rolled, a fairly robust cigar. This is a good smoke. If you ever try one of these, I'm going to make a recommendation. A lot of guys, cigars, scotch, but try right now. The Girl Scout cookies are for sale, and I'm going to tell you what. Buy a case of Thin Mints, put them in the freezer, take a cup of coffee, that cigar, and a Thin Mint. There are lots more questions that I did not answer, and we will answer them. But I think this has been a fabulous forum. I'll dive more down into tools and things I do in the shop and all that later. Just remember, the wood gives away the gun before the metal does. Store a muzzle down, and it's been a pleasure as always.